Good morning, this is Jenna here.
Good morning. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. Zoom is not working on my phone today, and I regret I'm in motion this morning. But I will be listening intently.
All right. Our typical chair is not present. Who would like to chair the meeting?
I call this meeting of the Parks and Arbor Board to order at 8:08 a.m. Will the clerk please take the roll call?
Board Member Fry. Board Member Fry is not present. Board Member Bizzle.
Here.
Board Member Thiel.
Here.
Board Member Bicknell.
Here.
And Board Member Green has asked to be excused. We do have a quorum.
Did anyone submit a public comment in advance?
We did not receive any in advance, and we do not have any attendees from the public.
If anyone in actual or virtual attendance would like to speak, please raise your hand now. We will now move on to the consent agenda consisting of So is there anything anyone that would like to be removed from the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes carry the day. The motion is passed. And I believe we now move into presentations. Park Plant's kickoff meeting with JUB engineers.
Thank you. This is John Rickard, Public Works Community Development Director, next to the Public Works Director. Previously we've met with JUB engineers, Justin Bearlocker, who's their planner, and discussed the park plan update. That was at the February 23rd meeting, and at the April 9th City Council meeting, the City Council approved a contract with JUB engineers to assist the city in doing our park plan update, which is a requirement for us to qualify to apply for Recreation Conservation Office grants. And in addition to that, we've had a lot of changes since our last park plan update. We're in full swing of an update of Lions Park. We've added a few parks since our last plan, Perseverance Park and Veterans Park. And then we've seen significant growth through the finishing of the homestead development and annexing the property south of Majanya Road. which, well, we're anticipating a lot of future growth out in that area. So we have to identify some areas where we need future parks and what those will look like, and involve the public in that. So with that, I will like to introduce you to Justin Bearlocker and Allison Tompkins, or who will be working with us. Justin, if you want to
Okay.
take
Thank
over.
you. Do you mind if I share my screen?
That'd be great.
Okay.
All right, Justin, you're good to share.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, thank you again for this opportunity to meet with you guys and go over the kickoff meeting here for the park plan update. As John said, we met back in February, went over the draft scope of work. At that time, there was a few items in that we that you guys had requested, and we'll go through those as part of this kickoff meeting today. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Justin Bearlocker with JB Engineers. I'm a planner with JB. I've been here about 18 years. Over the last few years, we've been doing more and more work with the city and with John and Mike. Lately, doing more planning work as well. So excited for the opportunity there. I also like to introduce Allison Tompkins. She is a landscape architect with JB. Allison, do you want to introduce yourself a little more?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a landscape architect by education and practice, and I've actually primarily been doing planning work the last, 15 plus years. And I've been with JB almost 3 years now, and I've been working on some different parks and plans, so I'm excited to get going on this one.
And then we'll also have one other team member as well who wasn't able to attend today, and that's Elizabeth Smith. She's a planner in the Kennewick office as well. So her and Allison will be working together on putting this plan together for you. Next, I wanted to go over the scope of work, an overview of the project. As when we met back in February, we went over this scope of work. The scope really hasn't changed much as far as the process. For plan development, we will go into task 1 is goals and objectives review and updates, inventory and data collection, public involvement.
I'm sorry,
process.
Justin.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you make your screen a little bit bigger?
Yeah. Is that better?
If you can go one more, that'd be great.
One more. How's that?
That's great.
Okay. So as I said, we have the goals and objectives, inventory and data collection that will be going through both the existing parks facilities and inventory, and then as well as city demographic data. Also identifying park themes, as was desired in previous discussions with city staff, to try and develop a specific theme for each type of park. Identify maintenance and operations data, etc. Task 3 is public involvement. This task will be occurring throughout, the process. Initially, it will be online surveys, and then reaching out to the public at an event, and then some public meetings specific to neighborhoods to discuss park plans and ideas, and gather more input on what the community would like to see in their park facilities. Task 4, we have a demand and needs analysis, looking at the level of service for the parks, reviewing the existing plan, identifying gaps and areas that we need to improve. Going into task 5 with the capital improvement program. This would include identifying new facilities and costs and funding sources for those facilities. Also look at long-term maintenance as well. And then task 6 would be the master plan document preparation that would occur throughout and mainly towards the end of the project. So overall, this scope of work is consistent with what we had identified before. The main things that we did change per our meeting back in February was we included 3 in-person public meetings with neighborhood groups. There was identified 3 areas within the city that is going to see growth in the future, and so those areas we wanted to reach out to that community and identify what types of vision they have for our parks in those areas. We also include an outreach event where we'd go out to the public. This would be with a sorry, I had a note here. During the farmers market or Freedom Festival, we'll get into this a little bit later, but go out and gather some on the grounds information and give updates on the planning process and ways for people to get involved. Lastly, we would be including an interactive map as part of the survey, online survey, and this would give the public an opportunity to add comments interactively in the map so they can visualize and we can visualize where people's comments are being identified through the city and better address them. And then we'll be including 3 concepts for these new parks throughout the city. So.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Justin, is that we're going to make sure that we're in alignment with the requirements for the Recreation Conservation Office, because we want to make sure that you're set up to go after funding opportunities for projects that you identify.
That's right. Thank you, Allison. Yeah, and that's the main purpose of the whole study, is to make sure that we can get future funding for projects. So we'll want to make a good effort as we go forward to identify what those projects are, because they need to be listed in this plan, and that would be especially important when we get to the capital improvement program portion of it, to identify what those improvements are and what the potential costs are, so the city can plan for those. Is there any questions or comments regarding the scope of work at this time from the board or staff?
Just I'll say this is very important because our current plan expires at the end of this year. And while thanks to our REAP 2 funding, we do have enough local funds for a local match as we do these parks. There's definitely not enough money where we can go do our own things. So the only way this stuff gets done is with the state Recreation Conservation Office money and ecology and all the other host of funders. Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
Okay.
Justin, I guess I would just ask what's the next step in the process, and so the power board can anticipate some anticipation on what to expect.
Yeah. So what our next step is, we put together kind of a schedule, laid it out for what we anticipate, with the goal of finishing the document, have a draft document, by fall for the board to review. But our next steps right now, we would be in May here, is to start the public involvement. And what we would like to do is get that survey put together. The goal would be to get it live by the middle of May. The intent would be to try and get it out to the public before school gets out. One item that the board talked about back in February was to try and increase social media outreach. And so we were hoping and thought it'd be a good idea to reach out to the schools and see if they could help publicize and get to gather more comments from the public, and the schools and the families in the community. So that was our intent, to get that survey going in the next 2 weeks, and then by the end of May, we would start gathering the data and bring it back to the PAR board by June. Do you have anything more to add to that, Allison?
No, that's kind of the plan, and there's some wiggle room there with dates, but our way of thinking was that if we can capture a lot of survey responses before school gets out and people are leaving on a lot of summer vacations and things, that would be the main goal. So whether that's the last couple weeks of May or into the first week of June, there's again some wiggle room there, but that's mainly our goal. A lot of people like to take off as soon as school gets out, and we don't want to miss a certain demographic on the survey response.
I see an opportunity here with the upcoming May 18 event.
Yeah.
That connect with that social media before and then input afterwards, to have some sort of in-person presentation there.
What is that event?
That's the block party event, and that really has a lot of university folks and the community at large. That's one of our larger events. I would highly recommend to take advantage of that opportunity while everyone's still in town. Because while Freedom Fest is big, it does get a lot of folks from outside the community. So to get more of the organic content, I would say block party would be key.
It's too bad that.
Oh, excuse me.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you would like to promote the online survey at the May 18th event then? Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, I think it's promoting it. I also think it wouldn't be a bad idea even have like a booth there for stuff and have like a QR code, because that is the key to get in front of like a lot of the people, because it's right on the main street.
Jim Fry would be a good guy to make contact with. I know he's got some planned communiques. He's the superintendent of schools, and may be able to plug this with a QR code and other things.
It sounds like we do have a city booth at the block party, so that would be a perfect opportunity to have maybe a board with some graphics on it and a QR code, so that people could take the survey.
Yeah, I mean, we typically put together a survey flyer to advertise the survey. So, I mean, it wouldn't take much to just expand that to a poster size that you could display at the city booth with a QR code on it, with introducing the project and here's the survey. Let us know what you think, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thanks for mentioning.
Yeah. The other thing I would urge for communication too is also get this out to the supervisors at like Wall Valley Academy and Rogers School so it can be blasted there. And then also Liberty Christian since they're right on the border.
I'm going to do a shameless plug, but if you want to do a mailing,
Oh,
that's not hard to do.
Yeah.
And it could be very fast and I can help.
yeah.
When do your utility bills go out? Because that's something that we also do pretty frequently as well, you know, on the back of the utility bill or in addition to it, a flyer.
Yeah, so typically we prepare that usually like roughly a week and a half before the end of the month. And then there is a newsletter that goes out with the utility bill. So it can be a little article in that, and it would go out to folks.
Okay.
And honestly, just because I have a feeling that everyone looks at the full newsletter, I wouldn't be against sending a postcard your way. Because I just get a feeling for a lot of folks, they're like, oh, newsletter. And yeah.
I believe the May newsletter is already in the works, and so that might be a June newsletter plan. So about mid-May would be the time to get something over to our utilities clerk, and she can throw it in there.
Yeah, I think if you could tell us how much space you have, then we could, you know, make it fit. Or if it can be just a full page, then that's what we would do.
I'd say real estate in that newsletter gets pretty tight. So I'd say half of a page, so half of a 8.5 by 11, because that newsletter has stuff for the city, university, everyone. So it gets pretty tight depending on the month.
Okay.
I don't work with the newsletter a lot. Is it possible? So we have a third party that actually does the mailing, but we do the printing, if I'm correct. And then we give it to them. They mail it out for us. Is it possible to have our own standalone page in addition to the newsletter?
I would
Be folded into the.
I would have to check that. That would be a utility billing question. I don't know the off the top of my head.
We'll find that out.
Yeah.
Real quick.
I guess the other thing that occurs to me is linking the farmer's market a couple of times. Surely doesn't need to be there every time, but that's a place where locals are.
Yeah.
How long are we anticipating the survey being open? Like a month or 2 months?
Usually a
seems
couple
long.
weeks, honestly. And
Yeah,
we've done a month before, but I can't tell you it really makes much difference in feedback. 2 weeks, we tend to get pretty good responses, and it depends more on getting the word out. So if, you know, and the standard ways to do that are something in with utility bills, flyers posted at City Hall or the post office, places like that, public places. And then any social media accounts you might have. And then the word gets out. And then, you know, obviously if you have any other suggestions, like tagging on to the city's booth, yeah, absolutely. We'll put a poster up there and get the word out.
Yeah, I'd recommend that for both Block Party, and then we can keep the poster at the farmers market booth as well, because that has locals. Freedom Festival has good attendance, but quite a few of the folks at that are from outside the community, so that could be a little not representative of the folks here.
Can you answer like a few questions about what the survey includes? Like, do we have a chance to see the content? And what sort of response are you looking for as far as response rates? How many do you consider, or what percentage do you consider being successful?
Geez, so I mean, the statistics are pretty low for survey responses and what's considered good. I mean, if you get a 10% survey response, that's usually considered really good. But oftentimes we see better than that, especially in smaller communities. I think the survey that I struggled the most with was in a bigger city like Nampa. And I think there's just so many people and they're so busy. We have way better success rates with smaller cities. But yes, I'm glad you brought up the content because that was actually one thing we had hoped to get some feedback from you today on. And if there are any particular issues or concerns that you have that you could share with us either right now or that you could email, we would love to start collecting that information. Because we do have some sort of standard, you know, park related questions, but we'll get more out of the survey if they're targeted to particular issues that you're facing. So, I mean, just some general things I would think of would be, you know, do the city's parks currently meet your needs? Or do you think there's a need for more parks and trails and open space? And if so, where? Because we can do map-based questions as well, using GIS as a tool. So yeah, very timely question. Would love to hear some feedback from your board and staff on any particular issues or concerns that you're aware of. And if you need some time to think on it too, and could email those to us in the next week or so, that's basically when we'd start building those survey questions. And then we'd send it to Mike. Is that right, Justin, as our main point of contact?
I'll be your main point of contact.
Okay.
Maybe if you guys could throw together your draft survey questions and we could email them out to the PAR board. Just have to remember that do not reply all. Just send your comments back to the team and not the board. We don't want to create a quorum.
Yeah, the one thing that occurs to me on this survey is that we're dealing with existing parks in existing neighborhoods, plus plan for brand new neighborhoods that don't even exist yet. And so trying to capture some of that input from two different stages of development.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about capturing information from people outside of the city because the county doesn't have a park system. So we're naturally going to pick up people from our school district. You know, our school district overflows the city boundaries as well. So so their information, their feedback's important, even though they don't live in the city. They're going to be using our parks. And so especially around some of the new development that we're going to be facing.
What sort of information are we collecting from the respondents? Are there any sort of demographic or age or whether you have kids or not sort of a thing? Are there categories of people that we can like consider their responses and then maybe weigh those against existing demographics to see whether or not there's, you know, extrapolate whether their opinions and perspectives might have deeper roots, depending on what we know about our community. Is any of that part of what's happening in the survey?
I'll answer that. I mean, I would like it to be, I know in the last survey, we had some questions around like age breakout and then if you had kids and then approximately what neighborhood you're in. I think that's really important because the last time we did this park plan, Homestead wasn't even halfway done at that point, and now it's about like 90% build out. We just are missing those wise size homes, and that entire neighborhood trends quite a bit younger. So I'm very curious what the results are going to be out there specifically, since it's like so disconnected from the rest of town. So I think having those drill down questions will help us answer that, because I think there's going to be some interesting needs that come out of that.
Well, from a standpoint of survey design, you could approach this a variety of different ways. Right now, it sounds like we're taking the shotgun approach, which is spread it far and wide. People who are interested will respond according to whether they feel the need to or not.
Yeah,
But whether that's representative of our people or not is a question that's probably relevant.
yeah,
There are other ways to go about surveying people that may be more representative of what actually is out there. And there are ways to raise your overall response rate by non-response prompting. So if that's something that is interesting, we might think about that as creating a more relevant survey tool. But I'm sure the feedback we'll get will be valuable regardless.
yeah. Well, I'm open ideas on that because I'll just say through other surveys we've done like for budgets and stuff like that, doing it through the newsletter channels and social media channels has been a little bit like underwhelming. I would say we've struggled to hit like the 5% number. So going back to that, I'd be ecstatic if we actually got over the 10 as they were saying, because I've actually never seen that in my time here.
I would concur. My experience has been that 10% is generally pretty good, but
Yeah.
we've been involved in some surveys that have reached over 70% response rates. So that is unusual, but it's possible.
If I may add to that, one of the things that we find is helpful to keep people responsive in those surveys is by limiting the number of questions. So if you have, a survey with 10 to 15 questions versus a survey with 30 or 40 questions, you're much more likely to get a response to the shorter survey than the longer ones. So another great reason to, have you vet those questions, make sure we've got them dialed in to the things that you're really trying to find out about the community.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I can think of probably a half a dozen surveys that I have started in the last 2 years that got too long, or I got an interruption and I never got back to it. So
Well, we'll start putting together that draft survey and get it sent out to staff shortly so we can get passed around and reviewed. And we'll also take into account the previous survey that was in the other plan as well and what questions were in there.
Bissell, but do you have any further questions on this? Jenna, do you have any more questions?
Nope, I've got some ideas for some questions, but I'll send those by email. Who should I send that to?
you can send them to me, John Rickard, and it will make sure you have my email information.
Awesome. Nope, I've got it. Thanks, John.
I have no further questions, so I believe we're ready to move to the next item.
Thank you, Justin and Allison.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Take care.
I guess that's me. So it looks like there's 2 action items. Athen, I think the park upgrades one technically might not be an action item. I don't know if that matters, but I'll try to move relatively quickly. I do have a meeting at 9 o'clock, so I'll go through this. First one, park standards and specifications. So the city has for a long time, like most cities has standards and specifications for things like road sections, utilities, lays out design, placement. I mean, really to make sure when things get constructed and repaired and maintained, it's done in a standard fashion. Up until this point, we have not had any park standards. With the upgrades we're doing to various parks around town and the likelihood of new parks coming online through development and then upcoming in the near future, we felt like it was important to include and start creating some park standards. So I'll just kind of go over a brief overview of the ones that we've created up to this point, and that we are hoping to take to council in May to get adopted. So the first one is, can you pull up the other attachment?
I didn't see the standards attached.
Were they not attached? Oh,
There was a list I have.
okay. Well, I apologize. I had intended for the attachment, there to be an attachment with the standards. The first one is really about playground surfacing. It is intended to ensure that any new playground surfacing that goes in is ADA compliant. There's a little bit more cost to installing that, but it's also a lot easier to maintain. You don't end up with wood chips and things scattered all over the place and having to replace that. And I just think it's important to, even if all the playground equipment isn't ADA accessible per se, I think it's important that the playground itself is. And so that's kind of the first one. There's a whole lot of language in there, essentially leading back to following ASTM standards and for some ADA surfacing. The second one is for park lighting. It's really to be dark sky compliant. It kind of gives some parameters on how many foot candles should be allowed for various lighting around trails and athletic facilities, and intending to keep, park lighting within the park and not be a nuisance to the neighbors. The next one has to do with park benches. So it's really kind of identifying how many benches per size of a park. So it's kind of, there's a table that kind of lists it per acre, and then also identifies some specific park style brand that we use. So we have a standard park bench that's the same from park to park. So city staff aren't having to, remember that this park bench or this style is at Veterans Park versus Kiwanis Park versus Lions Park. And so for maintenance and repair and upkeep, replacement, we feel like that's important. The next one has to do with park picnic tables. So again, it kind of has some matrix on how many picnic tables should go within various types of shelters, depending on size, and some parameters on, brand and style of picnic shelters. What's currently not in here, but will be updated before it goes to council, is a specification that a certain number of picnic tables are ADA accessible. And so those would be the picnic tables. They're square picnic tables that essentially leave the bench off of one side. So somebody in a wheelchair could pull up to and sit at the picnic table. Then we get into playgrounds specifically. So it talks about local parks and parklets, neighborhood parks, community parks, regional parks, and kind of the size per size of park, how large, kind of a set parameter for how big a playground should be that gets installed at that park. And then it also requires that playground space is filled. So it doesn't say, we don't end up with a 2,000 square foot playground with just a couple little pieces in one corner, and it's really not a 2,000 square foot playground. So it kind of lays that out, as well as going into some standards for playground equipment, meeting ASTM requirements, and ensuring essentially that we get commercial grade playground equipment, not something purchased from, Walmart or Amazon or something like that. And so nothing against those, they're just not correct for a city park. And then we talk about irrigation system, and it really just identifies that the city standard is, hunter controls, so that we don't end up, with a park that somebody else designs and builds that uses some foreign irrigation controls. We're trying to standardize our equipment that the city uses for maintenance purposes. Trails and pathways, it really is a short one. It really just says they need to be ADA compliant. And then security, talking about installing infrastructure for security. As we build more parks, we want to be able to add security cameras, same We didn't want to identify specifically what cameras. Right now, those are managed by the police department, and in the event that they change or go to something different, we just want to make sure the infrastructure is in place, electrical wise, conduit to be able to accommodate.
Here's what I find.
To be able to accommodate security cameras. So this is really our first go at this. There's likely to be more added in the future. Every year, the city staff and JEB engineers revisit our standards and specifications as a whole, look at them, make little tweaks, additions, and revise them and go back to council to get them readopted. So I guess I'll turn it over, ask if anybody has any questions.
I have several comments that I was involved in Perseverance Park up here, as well as in the Blue Zones project. And one is some sort of standard for wayfinding and signs that especially no smoking, no tobacco use in park signs. So some sort of standard there. One other thing that came up was water fountains. Do we have a standard for how many water fountains, what type of water fountains? Then restrooms, no restrooms, have restrooms, what type of restrooms? Then what did recently come up in Kiwanis, electrical power. Do we have no electrical power there? Some electrical power, some part, oh, we don't have it there, but somebody's gonna end up camping there. But anyway, we probably should have some sort of standard of where and what type, because we'd like to have events, perhaps events in parks, and then all of a sudden some electric power is needed for that.
Sure, no, those are great comments. And I appreciate the list of things to consider adding. I think at this point, it's likely that unless you guys don't recommend this to move forward, it's likely that we'll move forward to have what we currently are working on adopted, and we'll add these to a list to work on for our next update. Any of these times we do these standards update, there can always be a lot of scope creep, and every time you look at it, oh, what about this and what about that? And if we keep adding to it, it just never gets done and never gets adopted. And so I would recommend that we move forward with kind of where we're at, taking note of these items to add for future updates. How would that sound?
Well, some standards, widely adopted standards, are better than no standards. So let's keep building on a foundation of wise standards rather than too many standards or none. So
thank you.
I'm curious to know if current standards, like equipment we have in currently, if it would require changing things, or are we grandfathering those in and they're going to change when that time comes, or if we're looking at like a major overhaul in other areas, that'll have an impact on budget?
No, that's a great question. Anything that is currently built would essentially remain the same until it gets touched for a remodel or a project comes up where we're going to take that on. And at that time, we would construct it to the new standard. And so it's similar to if we changed a road section or sidewalk standard. Like for instance, I believe our sidewalk standards call for 6-foot sidewalks to be installed. There's lots of places in town that either have no sidewalks or have a 4 or 5-foot sidewalk. We're not going through town, ripping all those out and making them 6 foot. But when we do come through and do a project, we will, assuming that there's that sidewalk's more difficult because a lot of times that's related to available right of way. And so occasionally we make an exception and put a 5-foot sidewalk in anyway, because there's not room for a wider one. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is we don't go through and change everything that's existing until a project comes up where we're going to touch it.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And I figured that was probably the case, but without, asking the question, you don't know.
No, it's a great question.
I would also be really interested in that document that is missing. It makes it hard to sort
Yeah.
of make decisions on an action item without that.
And I apologize for that. I didn't catch that that didn't get added to the agenda. Let's see, how can we do that? We can send that out after this for review.
Well,
And I
let
guess we
me
could
ask this
defer on
question.
the motion.
Is there something pressing that would require this to happen today?
The plan, so really we wanted to get our standards because there's the standards that are going in front of council. This is just a tiny piece of it. It's the whole standards and specifications for all of the construction standards for the city. And we try to have those updated by spring. So really we're behind the ball because that's when construction projects kick off and anything new, we want to be in place before a project goes, whether it's private development or city project. And so we fell a little bit behind on this. We started it back in December, to be honest with you. And it takes some time and a lot of back and forth. And so I currently have it planned to go to council workshop on May 7th and to go to council for approval on May 14th. And so that is kind of I don't want to say the urgency, but the time frame on why I guess I was hoping for maybe a motion to recommend it today.
Well, I mean, I think if I was putting forth a motion on this, because I understand you want to get it taken care of, but without specifics, I think we're limited to what we can say philosophically. We're in support of standardizing, but the specifics of which are going to have to be looked at more thoroughly. But
Athen was able to, sorry to interrupt. Athen was able to pull those up. And so she's gonna get them up for your review, whether that's sufficient or not at this point in time. We do have them available for you. She's gonna screen share them.
I suppose what we could do is pull them from the update that we're going to do to be added at a future date. That is not ideal because we're essentially adopting the standards and then coming back and re-adopting the standards.
Yeah.
But I think that could be doable, or I could postpone until June. I gotta think that through. Up until this moment, that hadn't crossed my mind that we'd be in that situation, so. Why don't we do that? We'll either postpone it or we'll pull this from the agenda or and come back in May.
I think we're all in favor. I mean, my sense is that most people are going to support you on whatever the standards are, but having a chance to
Sure.
digest it a bit is probably a good plan. Because knowing what we're saying rah-rah to would be a good plan,
Sure.
I think.
Sounds good.
And I believe we're scheduled for this board just in another month. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Should we move on?
move on to the Veterans Park upgrades?
Absolutely. I will apologize. I did not, I think this got added, correct? The presentation? Is it up? Athen?
It was in the package.
Yeah, okay. And I apologize. I did not put this together. Alex Fazzari from JUB is, I believe, with us. He's a little under the weather. So I agreed that I would go through the presentation. But yeah, we can get it pulled up. And again, I apologize that the standards didn't get attached to the last one. I did not catch that, so that's on me. All right, can you go to the next slide? So I'll kind of just go over the brief agenda. We'll talk about the schedule. This is for the Veterans Park project. I guess, are you guys aware of this project? Let me start off. The city has received some grant funding to add athletic facilities, in particular pickleball courts, basketball courts, and a restroom at Veterans Park. So we engaged JEB engineers to help us with that process. And we were kind of in early stages of it, but it is well underway and moving pretty quickly. So I'll talk about kind of the schedule, where we're at. We can look at a conceptual layout and some potential, pretty early, but potentially proposed playground equipment, and then kind of the funding and where we're at. Next slide. So currently we've completed the topographical survey and the cultural resources survey. City staff and JEB staff met via Teams online for a kickoff meeting at the end of February, and then met again fairly recently for a 30% workshop. So we kind of looked at some conceptual layouts, then refined that a little bit more. Like a lot of these projects, there was a little bit of scope creep, and added a few things in that we felt like were important. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. Next slide. So we anticipate 60% design being completed by the end of June. That'll be JEB will do that, and we'll get that to city staff for review, and then submit it to RCO, which is the funding agency, and begin the environmental process. Planning to have 90% design by the end of August, and again, submitting that to RCO for review, with the hope to be able to go to ad and bid it this winter and be ready for construction, have all our funding in line, and be ready for construction in 2025. So next slide. So if you're familiar with Veterans Park, it's kind of triangular shaped. Currently, it's just a lot of grass with one of those playgrounds that was constructed by a developer that just was really minimal, really not up to par. Part of the reason that we're in having standards for these things. And so looking at space to be able to accommodate the pickleball courts and the basketball courts and the restroom, it all kind of fit best in that eastern portion of the park. Once we laid that out and looked at the existing layout of the playground, it really felt like it was in the middle of what could be very usable grass space for people to be able to pick a ball around or play catch. And so considering that it is not adequate as it stands, that we engaged JEB to look at relocating it and upgrading the playground as part of this project. So that's kind of where I talk about some of the scope creep that came in. It felt like if we're impacting the park this much, it was worth doing it right all at once. And so the plan is to go back and look for more funding to be able to help cover that. But this, you can kind of see there is the general layout of what we're planning. So that gray space kind of in the middle left side is the existing footprint of the existing playground. And then the colorful oval right in the middle of the screen is the proposed layout and location of a new playground. So next slide. And so with this being Veterans Park, we thought kind of a military type theme for some of the playground equipment might be appropriate. And so these are very conceptual. We've engaged with some of the local and bigger playground equipment manufacturers, and these were some of the concepts that came back. And so you can see from these pictures that there's kind of an airplane with slide, and trying to kind of stick with that military theme. If you go to the next slide, there's like a landing craft, that circular thing, I think is a spinning, yeah, well, it's designed like a helipad, but I think it's like a spinning, doesn't that thing spin? What do you call those? Merry-go-round? I guess so. Anyway, again, kind of the military theme. If you look at, I don't think you can see it in these photos, but the aerial, that circular thing, it kind of has a helipad theme to it. So, I guess moving on, continuing on. So the current funding, we have grant from RCO for $281,023, which requires a city match. And that is specific for the athletic, for the sports courts and the restroom. Cost opinion is quite a bit higher, but again, we're going back and trying to get more funding, and then adding in the playground elements would be funded separately. So, I guess that's kind of where we're at today. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Alex, if you're still on there, do you have anything to add? Did I miss anything important?
No, I think you covered that well.
Mike?
Yeah, one thing I will add is that if in general you're supportive of design playground equipment and stuff, because we're getting into the next biennium, Recreation Conservation Office has the next round of grants available for WWRP, LWCF, and YAF. Those are the same grants we use to pay for Lions Park and even the first phase of this. So the general concept is our next park board meeting, there'll be a resolution of support that we'll ask you to adopt, because we want to chase after the funds to do the playground the correct way, given the population that's out there. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Leif, any further questions?
Well, so the additional funding would be coming from where? For the playground equipment? Where is it? Where would that be coming from?
So where that would be coming from is that we would be going to State Recreation Conservation Office for additional funding. So the current sports complex is being paid for by Youth Athletic Facilities Grant. They have essentially, because of the Climate Commitment Act, they've essentially quadrupled the amount of money in WWRP, and I believe this playground would be prime for that. And they've actually now waived matches now for WWRP. So the general plan is to double down and apply for it through WWRP and get funded that way. And because it's a state program, we wouldn't be encumbered by the federal requirements. Because I will just say, in general, learning from the Lions Park experience, they're going to have to like break my arm to like apply for LWCF again, because they on websiting it through all their type, they portray it like a state program, but the LWCF's actually passed through Federal National Park Service funding, and that's how you get encumbered in NEPA and all of the crazy permit requirements that frankly delayed Lions Park for about 2.5 years. So yeah,
Fun.
Jenna, do you have any further questions?
None for me. Thank you.
I don't have any further questions. I just, yeah, outside funding with the fewest number of restrictions, yes.
I think we all agree.
Yeah. Are there any other items of business?
Hey, Mike, do we need to take the tabling of the action item to a vote?
That probably would be recommended. Yeah.
Well, are you withdrawing it, or are we saying we want to wait?
We can table it until the next meeting.
Either way, the effect is the
Yeah,
same.
let's go ahead and table it. That way we have a formal motion to table it, and I think that's probably the best course of action.
Okay.
Is there a motion to table the action item until the next meeting?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion is carried and the item is tabled until the next meeting. Is there a motion to conclude the meeting?
So are you asking for anything, any action on the Veterans Park?
No, that was intended to be an informational report.
Okay, it looks awesome, by the way.
Thank
Really
you.
good. Anytime we can get more pickleball courts in, it seems like it's a good thing.
Sure.
I will say it's not like a formal action, but before next meeting, even before the resolution of support, RCO does have a pre-application that I need to file by Tuesday. So just to get a feel from the room, everyone's like good with me filing a pre-app for the playground equipment, right?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay. It doesn't commit us anything. It's just they have a pre-app before the actual app. It's weird.
Well, we've had discussions about the playground equipment out there before.
Yeah.
So, it's a relevant conversation.
Like I said, it made sense to try to tackle it at the same time as the rest of the improvements and holistically look at the park instead of piecemealing it together. So.
Looks great.
Is there a motion to conclude this meeting?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor? Aye,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is concluded. We will at 9:08 PM. We will AM. And we will meet again in May,
Yep.
and you'll get a different chair the next time.